Then Mademoiselle's father. I have played with even more degrading ideas concerning him. He was a traveller. Supposing, I say to myself, that he has stolen a jewel, the eye of a god. Jealous priests are on his tracks. Yes, I, Hercule Poirot, have descended to depths such as these. I have had other ideas concerning this father, he went on, ideas at once more dignified and more probable. Did he, in the course of his wanderings, contract a second marriage? Is there a nearer heir than Monsieur Charles Vyse? But again, that leads nowhere, for we are up against the same difficulty, that there is really nothing of value to inherit. I have neglected no possibility, even that chance reference of Mademoiselle Nix to the offer made her by Monsieur Lazarus. You remember? The offer to purchase her grandfather's portrait? I telegraphed on Saturday for an expert to come down and examine that picture. He was the man about whom I wrote to Mademoiselle this morning. Supposing, for instance, it were worth several £1,000s. Well, you surely don't think a rich man like young Lazarus— is he rich? Appearances are not everything. Even an old-established firm with palatial showrooms and every appearance of prosperity may rest on a rotten basis. And what does one do then? Does one run about, crying out that times are hard? No. One buys a new and luxurious car. One spends a little more money than usual. One lives a little more ostentatiously, for credit, you see, is everything. But sometimes a monumental business has crashed for no more than a few £1,000s of ready money. Oh, I know, he continued, forestalling my protests. It is far-fetched. But it is not so bad as revengeful priests or buried treasure. It bears at any rate some relationship to things as they happen. And we can neglect nothing, nothing that might bring us nearer the truth. With careful fingers, he straightened the objects on the table in front of him. When he spoke, his voice was grave, and for the first time, calm. Motive, he said. Let us come back to that, and regard this problem calmly and methodically. To begin with, how many kinds of motive are there for murder? What are the motives which lead one human being to take another human being's life? We exclude, for the moment, homicidal mania, because I am absolutely convinced that the solution of our problem does not lie there. We also exclude killing done on the spur of the moment, under the impulse of an ungovernable temper. This is cold-blooded, deliberate murder. What are the motives that actuate such a murder as that? There is first, gain. Who stood to gain by Mademoiselle Buckley's death, directly or indirectly? Well, we can put down Charles Vyse. He inherits a property that, from the financial point of view, is probably not worth inheriting. He might perhaps pay off the mortgage, build small villas on the land, and eventually make a small profit. It is possible. The place might be worth something to him if he had any deeply cherished love of it. If it were, for instance, a family place. That is undoubtedly an instinct very deeply implanted in some human beings, and it has, in cases I have known, actually led to crime, but I cannot see any such motive in Monsieur Vyse's case. The only other person who would benefit at all by Mademoiselle Buckley's death is her friend, Madame Rice, but the amount would clearly be a very small one. Nobody else, as far as I can see, gains by Mademoiselle Buckley's death. What is another motive? Hate, or love that has turned to hate. The crime passionnel. Well, there again we have the word of the observant Madame Croft that both Charles Vyse and Commander Challenger are in love with the young lady. I think we can say that we have observed the latter phenomenon for ourselves, I remarked with a smile. Oh, yes, he tends to wear his heart on his sleeve, the honest sailor. For the other, we rely on the word of Madame Croft. Now, if Charles Vyse felt that he were supplanted, would he be so powerfully affected that he would kill his cousin, rather than let her become the wife of another man? It sounds very melodramatic, I said doubtfully. It sounds, you would say, un-English. I agree. But even the English have emotions. And a type such as Charles Vyse is the most likely to have them. He is a repressed young man, one who does not show his feelings easily. Such often have the most violent feelings. I would never suspect the Commander Challenger of murder for emotional reasons. No, he is not the type. But with Charles Vyse, yes, it is possible. But it does not entirely satisfy me. Another motive for crime, jealousy. I separate it from the last because jealousy may not necessarily be a sexual emotion. There is envy of possession, of supremacy. Such a jealousy as drove the Iago of your great Shakespeare to one of the cleverest crimes, speaking from the professional point of view, that has ever been committed. Why was it so clever? I asked, momentarily diverted. Parbleu! Because he got others to execute it. Imagine a criminal nowadays on whom one was unable to put the handcuffs because he had never done anything himself. But this is not the subject we were discussing. Can jealousy of any kind be responsible for this crime? Who has reason to envy Mademoiselle? Another woman? There is only Madame Rice, and as far as we can see, there was no rivalry between the two women. But again, that is only as far as we can see. There may be something there. Lastly, fear. Does Mademoiselle Nick, by any chance, hold somebody's secret in her power? Does she know something which, if it were known, might ruin another life? If so, I think we can say very definitely that she herself is unaware of it. But that might be, you know. That might be. And if so, it makes it very difficult. Because whilst she holds the clue in her hands, she holds it unconsciously, and will be quite unable to tell us what it is. You really think that is possible? It is a hypothesis. I am driven to it by the difficulty of finding a reasonable theory elsewhere. When you have eliminated other possibilities, you turn to the one that is left and say, since the other is not, this must be so. He was silent a long time. At last, rousing himself from his absorption, he drew a sheet of paper towards him and began to write. "What are you writing?" I asked curiously. "Mon ami, I am composing a list. It is a list of people surrounding Mademoiselle Buckley. Within that list, if my theory is correct, there must be the name of the murderer." He continued to write for perhaps 20 minutes, then shoved the sheets of paper across to me. "Voilà, mon ami. See what you make of it." On the paper was a list. A. Ellen. B. Her gardener husband. C. Their child. D. Mr. Croft. E. Mrs. Croft. F. Mrs. Rice. G. Mr. Lazarus. H. Commander Challenger. I. Mr. Charles Vyse. The letter J was blank. Remarks. A. Ellen. Suspicious circumstances. Her attitude and words on hearing of the crime. Best opportunity of anyone to have staged accidents and to have known of pistol, but unlikely to have tampered with car, and general mentality of crime seems above her level. Motive. None, unless hate arising out of some incident unknown. Note. Further inquiries as to her antecedents and general relations with N.B. B. Her husband. Same as above. More likely to have tampered with car. Note. Should be interviewed. C. Child. Can be ruled out. Note. Should be interviewed. Might give valuable information. D. Mr. Croft. Only suspicious circumstance, the fact that we met him mounting the stair to bedroom floor. Had ready explanation, which may be true, but it may not. Nothing known of antecedents. Motive? None. E. Mrs. Croft. Suspicious circumstances? None. Motive? None. F. Mrs. Rice. Suspicious circumstances? Full opportunity. Asked N.B. to fetch Rap. Has deliberately tried to create impression that N.B. is a liar, and her account of accidents not to be relied on. Was not at Tavistock when accidents occurred. Where was she? Motive. Gain? Very slight. Jealousy? Possibly, but nothing known. Fear? Also possible, but nothing known. Note. Converse with N.B. on subject. See if any light is thrown upon matter. Possibly something to do with F.R.'s marriage. G. Mr. Lazarus. Suspicious circumstances. General opportunity. Offer to buy picture. Said brakes of car were quite all right, according to F.R. May have been in neighbourhood prior to Friday. Motive? None, unless profit on picture. Fear? Unlikely. Note. Find out where J.L. was before arriving at St. Lou. Find out financial position of Aaron Lazarus and Son. H. Commander Challenger. Suspicious circumstances? None. Was in neighborhood all last week, so opportunity for accidents good. Arrived half an hour after murder. Motive? None. Mr. Vyse. Suspicious circumstances. Was absent from office at time when shot was fired in garden of hotel. Opportunity good. Statement about selling of end house open to doubt. Of a repressed temperament. Would probably know about pistol. Motive. Gain? Slight. Love or hate? Possible with one of his temperament. Fear? Unlikely. Note. Find out who held mortgage. Find out position of Vyse's firm. J? Question mark. There could be a J, e.g. an outsider, but with a link in the form of one of the foregoing. If so, probably connected with A.D., E, or F. The existence of J would explain 1. Ellen's lack of surprise at crime and her pleasurable satisfaction, but that might be due to natural pleasurable excitement of her class over deaths. 2. The reason for Croft and his wife coming to live in Lodge. 3. Might supply motive for F.R.'s fear of secret being revealed, or for jealousy. Poirot watched me as I read. "It is very English, is it not?" he remarked with pride. "I'm more English when I write than when I speak." "It's an excellent piece of work," I said warmly. "It sets all the possibilities out most clearly." "Yes," he said thoughtfully, as he took it back from me. "And one name leaps to the eye. My friend Charles Vyse. He has the best opportunities. We have given him the choice of 2 motives. Ma foi, if that was a list of racehorses, he would start favourite, n'est-ce pas? He is certainly the most likely suspect. You have a tendency, Hastings, to prefer the least likely. That, no doubt, is from reading too many detective stories. In real life, 9 times out of 10, it is the most likely and the most obvious person who commits the crime. But you don't really think that is so this time. There is only one thing that is against it: the boldness of the crime. That has stood out from the first. Because of that, as I say, the motive cannot be obvious." "Yes, that's what you said at first." "And that is what I say again." With a sudden, brusque gesture, he crumpled the sheets of paper and threw them on the floor. "No," he said, as I uttered an exclamation of protest, "that list has been in vain. Still, it has cleared my mind. Order and method. That is the first stage, to arrange the facts with neatness and precision. The next stage, yes, the next stage is that of the psychology, the correct employment of the little grey cells. I advise you, Hastings, to go to bed." "No," I said, "not unless you do. I'm not going to leave you. Most faithful of dogs. But you see, Hastings, you cannot assist me to think. That is all I am going to do. Think." I still shook my head. "Well, you might want to discuss some point with me." Well, you are a loyal friend. Take, at least, I beg of you, the easy chair." That proposal I did accept. Presently the room began to swim and dip. The last thing I remember was seeing Poirot carefully retrieving the crumpled sheets of paper from the floor and putting them away tidily in the waste paper basket. Then I must have fallen asleep. Chapter 10. Nick's Secret. It was daylight when I awoke. Poirot was still sitting where he had been the night before. His attitude was the same, but in his face was a difference. His eyes were shining with that queer cat-like green light that I knew so well. I struggled to an upright position, feeling very stiff and uncomfortable. Sleeping in a chair is a proceeding not to be recommended at my time of life. Yet one thing at least resulted from it. I awoke not in that pleasant state of lazy somnolence, but with a mind and brain as active as when I fell asleep. "Poirot," I cried, "you've thought of something." He nodded. He leaned forward, tapping the table in front of him. "Tell me, Hastings, the answer to these 3 questions. Why has Mademoiselle Nick been sleeping badly lately? Why did she buy a black evening dress. She never wears black. Why did she say last night, 'I have nothing to live for now'?" I stared. The question seemed beside the point. "Answer those questions, Hastings. Answer them." "Well, as to the first, she said she'd been worried lately." "Precisely. What has she been worried about?" "And the black dress, well, everybody wants a change sometimes." "For a married man, you have very little appreciation of feminine psychology. If a woman thinks she does not look well in a colour, she refuses to wear it." "And the last, well, it was a natural thing to say after that awful shock." "No, mon ami, it was not a natural thing to say. To be horror-struck by her cousin's death, to reproach herself for it, yes, all that is natural enough, but the other, no. She spoke of life with weariness, as of a thing no longer dear to her. Never before had she displayed that attitude. She had been defiant, yes, she had snapped the fingers, yes, and then, when that broke down, she was afraid. Afraid, mark you, because life was sweet, and she did not wish to die, but weary of life? No, that never. Even before dinner that was not so. We have there, Hastings, a psychological change, and that is interesting. What was it caused her point of view to change?" "Well, the shock of her cousin's death." "I wonder. It was the shock that loosed her tongue, but suppose the change was before that. Is there anything else could account for it?" "Oh, I don't know of anything." "Think, Hastings. Use your little grey cells. Well, really, what was the last moment we had the opportunity of observing her?" "Well, actually, I suppose at dinner." "Exactly. After that we only saw her receiving guests, making them welcome, purely a formal attitude. What happened at the end of dinner, Hastings?" "She went to the telephone," I said slowly. "À la bonne heure. You have got there at last. She went to the telephone, and she was absent a long time, 20 minutes at least. That is a long time for a telephone call. Who spoke to her over the telephone? What did they say? Did she really telephone? We have to find out, Hastings, what happened in that 20 minutes, for there, or so I fully believe, we shall find the clue we seek." "You really think so?" "Mais oui, all along, Hastings. I have told you that Mademoiselle has been keeping something back. She doesn't think it has any connection with the murder, but I, Hercule Poirot, know better. It must have a connection, for all along I have been conscious that there is a factor lacking. If there were not a factor lacking, why, then the whole thing would be plain to me. And as it is not plain to me, eh bien, then the missing factor is the keystone of the mystery. I know I am right, Hastings. I must know the answer to these 3 questions, and then I shall begin to see." "Well," I said, stretching my stiffened limbs, "I think a bath and a shave are indicated." By the time I had had a bath and changed into day clothing, I felt better. The stiffness and weariness of a night passed in uncomfortable conditions passed off. I arrived at the breakfast table feeling that 1 drink of hot coffee would restore me to my normal self. I glanced at the paper, but there was little news in it beyond the fact that Michael Seaton's death was now definitely confirmed. The intrepid airman had perished. I wondered whether tomorrow new headlines would have sprung into being. "Girl murdered during firework party, mysterious tragedy," something like that. I had just finished breakfast when Frederica Rice came up to my table. She was wearing a plain little frock of black marocaine, with a little soft pleated white collar. Her fairness was more evident than ever. "I want to see Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings. Is he up yet, do you know?" "I will take you up with me now," I said. "We shall find him in the sitting-room." "Thank you." "I hope," I said as we left the dining-room together, "that you didn't sleep too badly." "It was a shock," she said in a meditative voice. "But of course I didn't know the poor girl. It's not as though it had been Nick." "I suppose you'd never met this girl before?" "Once, at Scarborough. She came over to lunch with Nick." "It'll be a terrible blow to her father and mother," I said. "Dreadful." But she said it very impersonally. She was, I fancied, an egoist. Nothing was very real to her that did not concern herself. Poirot had finished his breakfast and was sitting reading the morning paper. He rose and greeted Frederica with all his customary Gallic politeness. "Madame, he said. Enchanté. He drew forward a chair. She thanked him with a very faint smile and sat down. Her 2 hands rested on the arms of the chair. She sat there very upright, looking straight in front of her. She did not rush into speech. There was something a little frightening about her stillness and aloofness. "Monsieur Poirot," she said at last, "I suppose there's no doubt that this sad business last night was all part and parcel of the same thing. I mean that the intended victim was really Nick." "I should say, madame, that there was no doubt at all." Frederica frowned a little. "Nick bears a charmed life," she said. There was some curious undercurrent in her voice that I could not understand. "Luck, they say, goes in cycles," remarked Poirot. "Perhaps. It is certainly useless to fight against it." Now there was only weariness in her tone. After a moment or two she went on. "I must beg your pardon, Monsieur Poirot, or Nick's pardon, too. Up till last night I did not believe. I never dreamed that the danger was serious." "Is that so, madame?" "I see now that everything will have to be gone into carefully, and I imagine that Nick's immediate circle of friends will not be immune from suspicion. Ridiculous, of course, but there it is. Am I right, Monsieur Poirot?" "You are very intelligent, madame." "You asked me some questions about Tavistock the other day, Monsieur Poirot. As you will find out sooner or later, I might as well tell you the truth now. I was not at Tavistock." "No, madame?" "I motored down to this part of the world with Mr. Lazarus early last week. We did not wish to arouse more comment than necessary. We stayed at a little place called Shellicombe." "That is, I think, about 7 miles from here, madame?" "About that, yes." Still in that quiet, far-away weariness. "May I be impertinent, madame? Is there such a thing in these days?" "Perhaps you are right, madame. How long have you and Monsieur Lazarus been friends?" "I met him 6 months ago." "And you care for him, madame?" Frederica shrugged her shoulders. "He is rich." "Oh la la!" cried Poirot. "That is an ugly thing to say." She seemed faintly amused. "Isn't it better to say it myself than to have you say it for me?" "Well, there is always that, of course. May I repeat, madame, that you are very intelligent." "You will give me a diploma soon," said Frederica, and rose. "There is nothing more you wish to tell me, madame?" "I do not think so, no. I am going to take some flowers round to Nick, and see how she is." "Ah, that is very aimable of you. Thank you, madame, for your frankness." She glanced at him sharply, seemed about to speak, then thought better of it, and went out of the room, smiling faintly at me as I held open the door for her. "She is intelligent," said Poirot. "Yes, but so is Hercule Poirot." "What do you mean?" "That it is all very well and very pretty to force the richness of Monsieur Lazarus down my throat. I must say that rather disgusted me. Mon cher, always you have the right reaction in the wrong place. It is not for the moment a question of good taste or otherwise. If Madame Rice is a devoted friend who is rich and can give her all she needs, why then, obviously Madame Rice would not need to murder her dearest friend for a mere pittance." "Oh," I said, "précisément. Oh. Why didn't you stop her going to the nursing home? Why should I show my hand? Is it Hercule Poirot who prevents Mademoiselle Nick from seeing her friends? Quelle idée! It is the doctors and the nurses, those tiresome nurses, so full of rules and regulations and doctors' orders. You're not afraid they might let her in after all? Nick may insist. Nobody will be let in, my dear Hastings, but you and me. And for that matter, the sooner we make our way there, the better." The sitting-room door flew open, and George Challenger barged in. His tanned face was alive with indignation. "Now look here, Monsieur Poirot," he said. "What's the meaning of this? I rang up that damned nursing home where Nick is, asked how she was and what time I could come round and see her, and they say the doctor won't allow any visitors. I want to know the meaning of that. To put it plainly, is this your work, or is Nick really ill from shock?" "I assure you, monsieur, that I do not lay down rules for nursing homes. I would not dare. Why not ring up the good doctor? What was his name now? Ah, yes, Graham. I have. He says she's going on as well as could be expected, usual stuff. But I know all the tricks. My uncle's a doctor. Harley Street, nerve specialist. Psychoanalysis, all the rest of it. Putting relations and friends off with soothing words. I've heard about it all. I don't believe Nick isn't up to seeing anyone. I believe you're at the bottom of this, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot smiled at him in a very kindly fashion. Indeed, I've always observed that Poirot has a kindly feeling for a lover. Now listen to me, mon ami, he said. If one guest is admitted, others cannot be kept out, you comprehend? It must be all or none. We want Mademoiselle's safety, you and I, do we not? Exactly. Then you understand, it must be none. I get you, said Challenger slowly. But then, chut, we will say no more. We will forget even what we have said. The prudence, the extreme prudence, is what is needed at present. I can hold my tongue, said the sailor quietly. He turned away to the door, pausing as he went out to say, No embargo on flowers, is there? So long as they're not white ones. Poirot smiled. And now, he said, as the door shut behind the impetuous Challenger, whilst Monsieur Challenger and Madame and perhaps Monsieur Lazarus all encounter each other in the flower shop, you and I will drive quietly to our destination. And ask for the answer to those 3 questions, I said. Yes, we will ask. Though, as a matter of fact, I know the answer. What? I exclaimed. Oh, yes. But when did you find out? Whilst I was eating my breakfast, Hastings. It stared me in the face. Tell me. No. I will leave you to hear it from Mademoiselle. Then, as if to distract my mind, he pushed an open letter across to me. It was a report by the expert Poirot had sent to examine the picture of old Nicholas Buckley. It stated definitely that the picture was worth, at most, £20. So, that is one matter cleared up, said Poirot. No mouse in that mousehole, I said, remembering a metaphor of Poirot's on one past occasion. Ah, you remember that? No, as you say, no mouse in that mousehole. £20, and Monsieur Lazarus offered 50. What an error of judgment for a seemingly astute young man. But there, we must start on our errand. The nursing home was set high on a hill overlooking the bay. A white-coated orderly received us. We were put into a little room downstairs, and presently a brisk-looking nurse came to us. One glance at Poirot seemed to be enough. She had clearly received her instructions from Dr. Graham, together with a minute description of the little detective. She even concealed a smile. "Miss Buckley has passed a very fair night," she said. "Come up, will you?" In a pleasant room with the sun streaming into it, we found Nick. In the narrow iron bed, she looked like a tired child. Her face was white, and her eyes were suspiciously red, and she seemed listless and weary. "It's good of you to come," she said in a flat voice. Poirot took her hand in both of his. "Courage, mademoiselle. There is always something to live for." The word startled her. She looked up in his face. "Oh," she said. "Oh! Will you not tell me now, mademoiselle, what it was that has been worrying you lately? Or shall I guess? And may I offer you, mademoiselle, my very deepest sympathy?" Her face flushed. "So you know. Oh, well, it doesn't matter who knows now. Now that it's all over. Now that I shall never see him again." Her voice broke. "Courage, mademoiselle. I haven't got any courage left. I've used up every bit in these last weeks, hoping and hoping, and just lately, hoping against hope." I stared. I could not understand one word. "Regard the poor Hastings," said Poirot. "He does not know what we are talking about." Her unhappy eyes met mine. "Michael Seaton, the airman," she said. "I was engaged to him. And he's dead." Chapter 11. The Motive. I was dumbfounded. I turned on Poirot. "Is this what you meant?" "Yes, mon ami. This morning I knew." "Well, how did you know?" How did you guess? You said it stared you in the face at breakfast. So it did, my friend. From the front page of the newspaper. I remembered the conversation at dinner last night, and I saw everything. He turned to Nick again. You heard the news last night? Yes, on the wireless. I made an excuse about the telephone. I wanted to hear the news alone, in case... He swallowed hard. And I heard it. I know. He took her hand in both of his. It was pretty ghastly. And all the people arriving. I don't know how I got through it. It all felt like a dream. I could see myself from outside, behaving just as usual. It was queer somehow. Yes, I understand. And then, when I went to fetch Freddie's wrap, I broke down for a minute. I pulled myself together quite quickly, but Maggie kept calling up about her coat, and then at last she took my shawl and went, and I put on some powder and some rouge and followed her out, and there she was, dead. Yes. It must have been a terrible shock. You don't understand. I was angry. I wished it had been me. I wanted to be dead, and there I was, alive, perhaps to live for years, and Michael dead, drowned far away in the Pacific. Pauvre enfant. I don't want to be alive. I don't want to live, I tell you, she cried rebelliously. I know. To all of us, mademoiselle, there comes a time when death is preferable to life, but it passes. Sorrow passes, and grief. You cannot believe that now, I know. It is useless for an old man like me to talk. Idle words, that is what you think. Idle words. You think I'll forget? And marry someone else? Never! She looked rather lovely as she sat up in bed, her two hands clenched and her cheeks burning. Poirot said gently, No, I am not thinking of anything of the kind. You are very lucky, mademoiselle. You have been loved by a brave man, a hero. How did you come to meet him? It was at Le Touquet, last September, nearly a year ago. And you became engaged? When? Just after Christmas, but it had to be a secret. Why was that? Michael's uncle, old Sir Matthew Seton. He loved birds and hated women. Ah, ce n'est pas raisonnable. Well, I don't mean quite that. He was a complete crank, thought women ruined a man's life, and Michael was absolutely dependent on him. He was frightfully proud of Michael, and it was he who financed the building of the Albatross and the expenses of the round-the-world flight. It was the dearest dream of his life as well as of Michael's. If Michael had pulled it off, well, then he could have asked his uncle anything, and even if old Sir Matthew had still cut up rough, well, it wouldn't have really mattered. Michael would have been made, kind of world hero. His uncle would have come round in the end. Yes, I see. But Michael said it would be fatal if anything leaked out. We must keep it a dead secret, and I did. I never told anyone, not even Freddie. Poirot groaned. If only you had told me, mademoiselle. Nick stared at him. But what difference would it have made? It couldn't have anything to do with these mysterious attacks on me. No, I'd promised Michael, and I kept my word. But it was awful, the anxiety, wondering and getting in a state the whole time, and everyone saying one was so nervy and being unable to explain. Yes, I comprehend all that. He was missing once before, you know, crossing the desert on the way to India. That was pretty awful. And then, after all, it was all right. His machine was damaged, but it was put right, and he went on. And I kept saying to myself that it would be the same this time. Everyone said he must be dead, and I kept telling myself that he must be all right, really. And then, last night... Her voice trailed away. You had hoped up till then. I don't know. I think it was more that I refused to believe. It was awful, never being able to talk to anyone. Yes, I can imagine that. Were you never tempted to tell Madame Rice, for instance? Sometimes I wanted to, frightfully. You do not think she guessed? I don't think so. Nick considered the idea carefully. She never said anything. Of course, she used to hint things sometimes, about our being great friends and all that. You never considered telling her when Monsieur Seaton's uncle died. You know that he died about a week ago. I know. He had an operation or something. I suppose I might have told anybody then, but it wouldn't have been a nice way of doing it, would it? I mean, it would have seemed rather boastful to do it just then, when all the papers were full of Michael, and reporters would have come and interviewed me. It would all have been rather cheap, and Michael would have hated it. I agree with you, mademoiselle. You could not have announced it publicly. I only meant that you could have spoken of it privately to a friend. I did sort of hint to one person, said Nick. I thought it was only fair, but I don't know how much the person took in. Poirot nodded. Are you on good terms with your cousin, Monsieur Vyse? He asked, with a rather abrupt change of subject. Charles? What put him into your head? Oh, I was just wondering, that was all. Charles means well, said Nick. He's a frightful stick, of course. Never moves out of this place. He disapproves of me, I think. Oh, mademoiselle, and I hear that he has laid all his devotion at your feet. Disapproving of a person doesn't keep you from having a pash for them. Charles thinks my mode of life is reprehensible, and he disapproves of my cocktails, my complexion, my friends, and my conversation, but he still feels my fatal fascination. He always hopes to reform me, I think. She paused, and then said, with a ghost of a twinkle, Who have you been pumping to get the local information? Oh, you must not give me away, mademoiselle. I had a little conversation with the Australian lady, Madame Croft. She's rather an old dear when one has time for her. Terribly sentimental. Love and home and children, you know the sort of thing. I am old-fashioned and sentimental myself, mademoiselle. Are you? I should have said that Captain Hastings was the sentimental one of you two. I blushed indignantly. He is furious, said Poirot, eyeing my discomfiture with a good deal of pleasure. But you are right, mademoiselle. Yes, you are right. Not at all, I said angrily. Hastings has a singularly beautiful nature. It has been the greatest hindrance to me at times. Don't be absurd, Poirot. He is, to begin with, reluctant to see evil anywhere. And when he does see it, his righteous indignation is so great that he is incapable of dissembling. Altogether a rare and beautiful nature. No, mon ami, I will not permit you to contradict me. It is as I say. You've both been very kind to me, said Nick gently. La, mademoiselle, that is nothing. We have much more to do. To begin with, you will remain here. You will obey orders. You will do what I tell you. At this juncture, I must not be hampered. Nick sighed wearily. I'll do anything you like. I don't care what I do. You will see no friends for the present. I don't care. I don't want to see anyone. For you, the passive part. For us, the active one. Now, mademoiselle, I am going to leave you. I will not intrude longer upon your sorrow. He moved towards the door, pausing with his hand on the handle to say over his shoulder, By the way, you once mentioned a will you made. Where is it, this will? Oh, it's knocking round somewhere. At End House? Yes. In a safe? Locked up in your desk? I really don't know. It's somewhere about. She frowned. I'm frightfully untidy, you know. Papers and things like that would be mostly in the writing table in the library. That's where most of the bills are. The will is probably with them. Or it might be in my bedroom. You permit me to make the search, yes? If you want to. Yes. Look at anything you like. Merci, mademoiselle. I will avail myself of your permission. Chapter 12. Ellen. Poirot said no word till we had emerged from the nursing home into the outer air. Then he caught me by the arm. You see, Hastings? You see? Ah, sacré tonnerre. I was right. I was right. Always I knew there was something lacking, some piece of the puzzle that was not there, and without that missing piece the whole thing was meaningless. His almost despairing triumph was double Dutch to me. I could not see that anything very epoch-making had occurred. It was there all the time, and I could not see it. But how should I? To know there is something, that yes, but to know what that something is, ça c'est bien plus difficile. Do you mean that this has some direct bearing on the crime? Ma foi, do you not see? As a matter of fact, I don't. Is it possible? Why, it gives us what we have been looking for, the motive, the hidden, obscure motive. I may be very dense, but I can't see it. Do you mean jealousy of some kind? Jealousy? No, my friend. The usual motive, the inevitable motive. Money, my friend, money. I stared. He went on, speaking more calmly. Listen, mon ami. Just over a week ago, Sir Matthew Seton dies, and Sir Matthew Seton was a millionaire, one of the richest men in England. Oh, yes, but attendez, one step at a time. He has a nephew whom he idolizes, and to whom we may safely assume he has left his vast fortune. But, mais oui, legacies? Yes. An endowment to do with his hobby? Yes, but the bulk of the money will go to Michael Seton. Last Tuesday, Michael Seton is reported missing, and on Wednesday the attacks on Mademoiselle's life begin. Supposing, Hastings, that Michael Seton made a will before he started on his flight, and that in that will he left all he had to his fiancée. That's pure supposition. It is supposition, yes, but it must be so, because if it is not so, there is no meaning in anything that has happened. It is no paltry inheritance that is at stake. It is an enormous fortune. I was silent for some minutes, turning the matter over in my mind. It seemed to me that Poirot was leaping to conclusions in a most reckless manner, and yet I was secretly convinced that he was right. It was his extraordinary flair for being right that influenced me. Yet it seemed to me that there was a good deal to be proved still. But if nobody knew of the engagement, I argued, pah, somebody did know. For the matter of that, somebody always does know. If they do not know, they guess. Madame Rice suspected. Mademoiselle Nick admitted as much. She may have had means of turning those suspicions into certainties. How? Well, for one thing, there must have been letters from Michael Seton to Mademoiselle Nick. They had been engaged some time, and her best friend could not call that young lady anything but careless. She leaves things here and there and everywhere. I doubt if she has ever locked up anything in her life. Oh, yes, there would be means of making sure. And Frederica Rice would know about the will that her friend had made. Well, doubtless. Oh, yes. It narrows down now. You remember my list? A list of persons numbered from A to J? It has narrowed down to only 2 persons. I dismiss the servants. I dismiss Commander Challenger, even though he did take 1 hour and a half to reach here from Plymouth, and the distance is only 30 miles. I dismiss Monsieur Lazarus, who offered £50 for a picture that was only worth 20. It is odd that, when you come to think of it, most uncharacteristic. I dismiss the Australians, so hearty and so pleasant. I keep 2 people on my list still. One is Frederica Rice, I said slowly. I had a vision of her face, the golden hair, the white fragility of the features. Yes, she is indicated very clearly. However carelessly worded Mademoiselle's will may have been, she would be plainly indicated as a residuary legatee. Apart from End House, everything was to go to her. If Mademoiselle Nick instead of Mademoiselle Maggie had been shot last night, Madame Rice would be a rich woman today. I can hardly believe it. You mean that you can hardly believe that a beautiful woman can be a murderess? One often has a little difficulty with members of a jury on that account, but you may be right. There is still another suspect. Who? Charles Vyse. But he only inherits the house. Yes, but he may not know that. Did he make Mademoiselle's will for her? I think not. If so, it would be in his keeping, not knocking around somewhere, or whatever the phrase was that Mademoiselle used. So you see, Hastings, it is quite probable that he knows nothing about that will. He may believe that she has never made a will, and that in that case he will inherit as next of kin. You know, I said, that really seems to me much more probable. That is your romantic mind, Hastings, the wicked solicitor, a figure in fiction. If, as well as being a solicitor, he has an impassive face, it makes the matter almost certain. It is true that in some ways he is more in the picture than Madame. He would be more likely to know about the pistol, and more likely to use one. And to send the boulder crashing down, perhaps. Though, as I have told you, much can be done by leverage. And the fact that the boulder was dislodged at the wrong minute and consequently missed Mademoiselle is more suggestive of feminine agency. The idea of tampering with the interior of a car seems masculine in conception, though many women are as good mechanics as men nowadays. On the other hand, there are one or two gaps in the theory against Monsieur Vyse, such as, he is less likely to have known of the engagement than Madame. And there is another point. His action was rather precipitate. What do you mean? Well, until last night there was no certitude that Seaton was dead. To act rashly without due assurance seems very uncharacteristic of the legal mind. Yes, I said. A woman would jump to conclusions. Exactly. Ce que femme veut, Dieu veut. That is the attitude. It's really amazing the way Nick has escaped. It seems almost incredible. And suddenly I remembered the tone in Frederica's voice as she had said, Nick bears a charmed life. I shivered a little. Yes, said Poirot thoughtfully, and I can take no credit to myself, which is humiliating. Providence, I murmured. Ah, mon ami, I would not put on the shoulders of the good God the burden of men's wrongdoing. You say that in your Sunday morning voice of thankfulness, without reflecting that what you are really saying is that le bon Dieu has killed Miss Maggie Buckley. Really, Poirot. Really, my friend. But I will not sit back and say le bon Dieu has arranged everything. I will not interfere, because I am convinced that le bon Dieu created Hercule Poirot for the express purpose of interfering. It is my métier. We had been slowly ascending the zigzag path up the cliff. It was at this juncture that we passed through the little gate into the grounds of End House. Poof, said Poirot. That ascent is a steep one. I am hot. My moustaches are limp. Yes, as I was saying just now, I am on the side of the innocent. I am on the side of Mademoiselle Nick because she was attacked. I am on the side of Mademoiselle Maggie because she has been killed. And you're against Frederica Rice and Charles Vyse. No, Hastings. I keep an open mind. I say only that, at the moment, one of those two is indicated. Chut! We had come out onto the strip of lawn by the house, and a man was driving a mowing machine. He had a long, stupid face and lackluster eyes. Beside him was a small boy of about 10, ugly but intelligent-looking. It crossed my mind that we had not heard the mowing machine in action, but I presumed that the gardener was not overworking himself. He had probably been resting from his labours and had sprung into action on hearing our voices approaching. "Good morning," said Poirot. "Good morning, sir." "You are the gardener, I suppose, the husband of Madame, who works in the house." "He's my dad," said the small boy. "That's right, sir," said the man. "You'll be the foreign gentleman, I take it, that's really a detective. Is there any news of the young mistress, sir?" "I come from seeing her at the immediate moment. She has passed a satisfactory night." "We've had a policeman here," said the small boy. "That's where the lady was killed, here by the steps. I seen a pig killed once, haven't I, Dad?" "Ah," said his father, unemotionally. "Dad used to kill pigs when he worked on a farm, didn't you, Dad? I seen a pig killed. I liked it." "Young'uns like to see pigs killed," said the man, as though stating one of the unalterable facts of nature. "Shot with a pistol, the lady was," continued the boy. "She didn't have her throat cut, no." We passed on to the house, and I felt thankful to get away from the ghoulish child. Poirot entered the drawing-room, the windows of which were open, and rang the bell. Ellen, neatly attired in black, came in answer to the bell. She showed no surprise at seeing us. Poirot explained that we were here by permission of Miss Buckley, to make a search of the house. "Very good, sir." "The police have finished?" "They said they'd seen everything they wanted, sir. They've been about the garden since very early in the morning. I don't know whether they found anything." She was about to leave the room when Poirot stopped her with a question. "Were you very surprised last night when you heard Miss Buckley had been shot?" "Yes, sir. Very surprised. Miss Maggie was a nice young lady, sir. I can't imagine anyone being so wicked as to want to harm her." "If it had been anyone else, you would not have been so surprised, eh?" "I don't know what you mean, sir." "When I came into the hall last night, you asked at once whether anyone had been hurt. Were you expecting anything of the kind?" She was silent. Her fingers pleated a corner of her apron. She shook her head and murmured, "You gentlemen wouldn't understand." "Oh, yes, yes," said Poirot. "I would understand. However fantastic what you may say, I would understand." She looked at him doubtfully, then seemed to make up her mind to trust him. "You see, sir, this isn't a good house." I was surprised, and a little contemptuous. Poirot, however, seemed to find the remark not in the least unusual. "You mean it is an old house?" "Yes, sir. Not a good house." "You have been here long?" "6 years, sir. But I was here as a girl, in the kitchen as kitchen maid. That was in the time of old Sir Nicholas. It was the same then." Poirot looked at her attentively. "In an old house," he said, "there is sometimes an atmosphere of evil." "That's it, sir," said Ellen eagerly. "Evil. Bad thoughts, and bad deeds, too. It's like dry rot in a house, sir. You can't get it out. It's a sort of feeling in the air. I always knew something bad would happen in this house, some day." "Well, you have been proved right." "Yes, sir." There was a very slight, underlying satisfaction in her tone, the satisfaction of one whose gloomy prognostications have been shown to be correct. "But you didn't think it would be Miss Maggie?" "No, indeed, I didn't, sir. Nobody hated her. I'm sure of it." It seemed to me that in those words was a clue. I expected Poirot to follow it up, but to my surprise he shifted to quite a different subject. "You didn't hear the shots fired?" "I couldn't have told with the fireworks going on. Very noisy they were." "You weren't out watching them?" "No, I hadn't finished clearing up dinner." "Was the waiter helping you?" "No, sir. He'd gone out into the garden to have a look at the fireworks." "But you didn't go?" "No, sir." "Why was that?" "I wanted to get finished." "You don't care for fireworks?" "Oh, yes, sir. It wasn't that, but you see, there's 2 nights of them, and William and I get the evening off tomorrow and go down to the town and see them from there." "I comprehend. And you heard Mademoiselle Maggie asking for her coat and unable to find it?" "I heard Miss Nick run upstairs, sir, and Miss Buckley call up from the front hall, saying she couldn't find something, and I heard her say, 'All right, I'll take the shawl.'" "Pardon?" Poirot interrupted. "You did not endeavour to search for the coat for her? Or get it from the car where it had been left?" "I had my work to do, sir." "Quite so. And doubtless neither of the 2 young ladies asked you because they thought you were out looking at the fireworks?" "Yes, sir." "So that other years you have been out looking at the fireworks?" A sudden flush came into her pale cheeks. "I don't know what you mean, sir. We're always allowed to go out into the garden. If I didn't feel like it this year, and would rather get on with my work and go to bed, well, that's my business, I imagine." Mais oui, I did not intend to offend you. Why should you not do as you prefer? To make a change, it is pleasant." He paused, and then added, "Now, another little matter in which I wonder whether you can help me. This is an old house. Are there, do you know, any secret chambers in it?" "Well, there's a kind of sliding panel in this very room. I remember being shown it as a girl, only I can't remember just now where it is. Or was it in the library? I can't say, I'm sure. Big enough for a person to hide in?" "Oh, no, indeed, sir. A little cupboard place, a kind of niche, about 1 foot square, sir, not more than that." "Oh, no, that is not what I meant at all." The blush rose to her face again. "If you think I was hiding anywhere, I wasn't. I heard Miss Nick run down the stairs and out, and I heard her cry out, and I came into the hall to see if anything was the matter, and that's the gospel truth, sir. That's the gospel truth." Chapter 13. Letters. Having successfully got rid of Ellen, Poirot turned a somewhat thoughtful face towards me. "I wonder now. Did she hear those shots?" "I think she did." "She heard them? She opened the kitchen door. she heard Nick rush down the stairs and out, and she herself came into the hall to find out what had happened. Well, that is natural enough. But why did she not go out and watch the fireworks that evening? That is what I should like to know, Hastings. What was your idea in asking about a secret hiding place? A mere fanciful idea that, after all, we might not have disposed of J. J? Yes, the last person on my list, the problematical outsider. Supposing for some reason connected with Ellen that J had come to the house last night, he, I assume a he, conceals himself in a secret chamber in this room. A girl passes through, whom he takes to be Nick. He follows her out and shoots her. No, c'est idiot. And anyway, we know there is no hiding place. Ellen's decision to remain in the kitchen last night was a pure hazard. Come, let us search for the will of Mademoiselle Nick. There were no papers in the drawing-room. We adjourned to the library, a rather dark room, looking out on the drive. Here there was a large, old-fashioned walnut bureau writing table. It took us some time to go through it. Everything was in complete confusion. Bills and receipts were mixed up together, letters of invitation, letters pressing for payment of accounts, letters from friends. "We will arrange these papers," said Poirot sternly, "with order and method." He was as good as his word. Half an hour later, he sat back with a pleased expression on his face. Everything was neatly sorted, docketed, and filed. "C'est bien, sir. One thing is at least to the good. We have had to go through everything so thoroughly that there is no possibility of our having missed anything." "No, indeed. Not that there's been much to find. Except possibly this." He tossed across a letter. It was written in large, sprawling handwriting, almost indecipherable. "Darling, party was too marvellous. Feel rather a worm today. You were wise not to touch that stuff. Don't ever start, darling. It's too damned hard to give up. I'm writing the boyfriend to hurry up the supply. What hell life is. Yours, Freddie." "Dated last February," said Poirot thoughtfully. "She takes drugs, of course. I knew that as soon as I looked at her." "Really? I never suspected such a thing." "It is fairly obvious. You only have to look at her eyes. And then there are her extraordinary variations of mood. Sometimes she is all on edge, strung up. Sometimes she is lifeless, inert. Drug-taking affects the moral sense, does it not? Inevitably. But I do not think Madame Rice is a real addict. She is at the beginning, not the end. And Nick? Well, there are no signs of it. She may have attended a dope party now and then for fun, but she is no taker of drugs. I'm glad of that." I remembered suddenly what Nick had said about Frederica, that she was not always herself. Poirot nodded, and tapped the letter he held. This is what she was referring to, undoubtedly. "Well, we have drawn the blank, as you say, here. Let us go up to Mademoiselle's room." There was a desk in Nick's room also, but comparatively little was kept in it. Here again there was no sign of a will. We found the registration book of her car and a perfectly good dividend warrant of a month back. Otherwise there was nothing of importance. Poirot sighed in an exasperated fashion. The young girls, they are not properly trained nowadays. The order, the method, it is left out of their bringing up. She is charming, Mademoiselle Nick, but she is a featherhead. Decidedly, she is a featherhead. He was now going through the contents of a chest of drawers. "Surely, Poirot," I said with some embarrassment, "those are underclothes." He paused in surprise. "And why not, my friend? Well, don't you think? I mean, we can hardly—" He broke into a roar of laughter. "Decidedly, my poor Hastings, you belong to the Victorian era. Mademoiselle Nick would tell you so if she were here. In all probability, she would say that you had the mind like the sink. Young ladies are not ashamed of their underclothes nowadays. The camisole, the cami-knicker, it is no longer a shameful secret. Every day on the beach all these garments will be discarded within a few feet of you. And why not? I don't see any need for what you're doing. Écoutez, my friend. Clearly, she does not lock up her treasures, Mademoiselle Nick. If she wished to hide anything from sight, where would she hide it? Underneath the stockings and the petticoats. Ah, what have we here? He held up a packet of letters tied with a faded pink ribbon. "The love letters of Monsieur Michael Seton, if I mistake not." Quite calmly, he untied the ribbon and began to open out the letters. "Poirot!" I cried, scandalized. "You really can't do that. It isn't playing the game." "I am not playing a game, mon ami." His voice rang out suddenly harsh and stern. "I am hunting down a murderer." "Oh, yes, but private letters may have nothing to tell me. On the other hand, they may. I must take every chance, my friend. Come, you might as well read them with me. 2 pairs of eyes are no worse than 1 pair. Console yourself with the thought that the staunch Ellen probably knows them by heart." I did not like it. Still, I realized that in Poirot's position he could not afford to be squeamish, and I consoled myself by the quibble that Nick's last word would have been, "Look at anything you like." The letters spread over several dates, beginning last winter. New Year's Day. Darling, the new year is in, and I am making good resolutions. It seems too wonderful to be true that you should actually love me. You've made all the difference to my life. I believe we both knew from the very first moment we met. Happy New Year, my lovely girl. Yours forever, Michael. February the 8th. Dearest love, how I wish I could see you more often. This is pretty rotten, isn't it? I hate all this beastly concealment, but I explained to you how things are. I know how much you hate lies and concealment. I do too, but honestly, it might upset the whole apple cart. Uncle Matthew has got an absolute bee in his bonnet about early marriages and the way they wreck a man's career, as though you could wreck mine, you dear angel. Cheer up, darling, everything will come out right. Yours, Michael. March the 2nd. I oughtn't to write to you 2 days running, I know, but I must. When I was up yesterday, I thought of you. I flew over Scarborough. Blessed, blessed, blessed Scarborough, the most wonderful place in the world. Darling, you don't know how I love you. Yours, Michael. April the 18th. Dearest, the whole thing is fixed up, definitely. If I pull this off, and I shall pull it off, I shall be able to take a firm line with Uncle Matthew, and if he doesn't like it, well, what do I care? It's adorable of you to be so interested in my long, technical descriptions of the albatross. How I long to take you up in her. Some day. Don't for goodness sake worry about me. The thing isn't half so risky as it sounds. I simply couldn't get killed now that I know you care for me. Everything will be all right, sweetheart. Trust your Michael. April the 20th. You angel, every word you say is true, and I shall treasure that letter always. I'm not half good enough for you. You are so different from everybody else. I adore you. Your Michael. The last was undated. Dearest, well, I'm off tomorrow, feeling tremendously keen and excited and absolutely certain of success. The old albatross is all tuned up. She won't let me down. Cheer up, sweetheart, and don't worry. There's a risk, of course, but all life's a risk, really. By the way, somebody said I ought to make a will. Tactful fellow, but he meant well, so I have, on half a sheet of notepaper, and sent it to old Whitfield. I'd no time to go round there. Somebody once told me that a man made a will of 3 words, all to mother, and it was legal, all right. My will was rather like that. I remembered your name was really Magdala, which was clever of me. A couple of the fellows witnessed it. Don't take all this solemn talk about wills to heart, will you? I didn't mean that pun. An accident. I shall be as right as rain. I'll send you telegrams from India and Australia and so on. And keep up heart. It's going to be all right. See? Good night, and God bless you. Michael. Poirot folded the letters together again. You see, Hastings, I had to read them, to make sure. It is as I told you. Well, surely you could have found out some other way. No, mon cher. That is just what I could not do. It had to be this way. We have now some very valuable evidence. In what way? We now know that the fact of Michael's having made a will in favour of Mademoiselle Nick is actually recorded in writing. Anyone who read these letters would know the fact. And with letters carelessly hidden like that, anyone could read them. Ellen, almost certainly, I should say. We will try a little experiment on her before passing out. There is no sign of the will. No, that is curious, but in all probability it is thrown on top of a bookcase or inside a china jar. We must try to awaken Mademoiselle's memory on that point. At any rate, there is nothing more to be found here. Ellen was dusting the hall as we descended. Poirot wished her good morning very pleasantly as we passed. He turned back from the front door to say, "You knew, I suppose, that Miss Buckley was engaged to the airman, Michael Seton?" She stared. "What? The one there's all the fuss in the papers about?" "Yes." "Well, I never. To think of that! Engaged to Miss Nick!" Complete and absolute surprise registered very convincingly, I remarked as we got outside. Yes, it really seemed genuine. Perhaps it was, I suggested. And that packet of letters reclining for months under the lingerie? Non, mon ami. All very well, I thought to myself, but we're not all Hercule Poirots. We do not all go nosing into what does not concern us. But I said nothing. This Ellen, she is an enigma, said Poirot. I do not like it. There is something here that I do not understand.